People love to make assumptions about personality types, especially the quiet ones who don't explain themselves much. And when it comes to the Sigma personality type, the assumptions are usually way off base. Most people think they have these guys figured out after one conversation, when really they're missing the whole picture. The biggest problem is that Sigma males don't fit into the normal boxes that people use to understand others. They're not your typical introverts who are just shy, and they're definitely not the cold, emotionless robots that everyone assumes they are. But because they don't act like most people expect, they end up getting labeled with all kinds of stuff that isn't even close to accurate. What makes this worse is that Sigma males usually don't bother correcting these wrong ideas because explaining themselves to people who already made up their minds feels like a waste of energy. So the myths just keep spreading, and people keep thinking they understand this personality type when they really don't have a clue. The truth is way more interesting than the stereotypes, but it's also more complicated than most people want to deal with. Sigma men are doing things for reasons that make perfect sense once you understand how their minds actually work, but from the outside it just looks weird or antisocial. Here are 8 things people constantly get wrong about Sigma males and what's really going on underneath all those assumptions. 1. They don't hate people, they hate fakery. Most people think Sigma males are misanthropes who just can't stand human company. This couldn't be further from the truth. What they actually can't stand is when people put on this whole performance instead of just being real. You know that person who acts completely different depending on who's in the room. That makes a Sigma's skin crawl. Think about it from their perspective. They've probably spent years watching people switch personalities like they're changing clothes. One minute someone's your best friend when they need something. The next minute they're talking trash about you to someone else. It's exhausting to watch, let alone deal with. So when a Sigma seems standoffish or uninterested in social situations, he's not rejecting human connection. He's filtering out the noise. The interesting part is that when Sigma males do find authentic people, they can form incredibly deep relationships. But here's the catch. They'd rather be alone than surrounded by people wearing masks. This isn't antisocial behavior, it's quality control. They've learned that most surface-level interactions are just elaborate games where nobody says what they really mean, and honestly, who has time for that? When you understand this, their selective nature suddenly makes perfect sense. They're not cold or unfriendly, they're just waiting for someone real to show up to the conversation. 2. They're not cold, they're cautious with trust. Studies show most people make a snap decision to trust or distrust someone within seconds of meeting them. For Sigma males, that shortcut doesn't exist. They don't hand over trust like a default setting. They put it through a slow, deliberate process, and that's exactly why so many outsiders mistake them for being cold. What looks like distance is really just a built-in filter. Most people operate on this assumption that everyone deserves immediate trust and openness until they prove otherwise. Sigma males flip that script completely. They start from a neutral position and let people earn their way into deeper levels of connection. It's not personal, it's practical. They've probably had experiences where being too open too quickly led to disappointment or betrayal, so they've developed this natural defense system. What's really interesting is that once a Sigma decides you're trustworthy, he can be an incredibly warm and loyal friend. But getting to that point requires patience, and most people aren't willing to invest that time. They want instant connection and emotional availability, and when they don't get it, they label the Sigma male as cold or aloof. The reality is that beneath that careful exterior is usually someone who feels things very deeply. He has just learned to be selective about who gets to see that side. It's not coldness, it's emotional intelligence disguised as distance. 3. They don't hate authority, they hate incompetence. Here's where people really get Sigma males wrong. They see someone who doesn't automatically bow down to every boss or authority figure and assume they're rebellious troublemakers who can't handle being told what to do. That's not it at all. What drives these men crazy isn't authority itself. It's when people in positions of power clearly don't know what they're doing but expect blind obedience anyway. Think about your worst boss ever. The one who made decisions that made no sense, ignored good advice, and expected you to smile and nod along with their incompetence. Most people just grit their teeth and deal with it because that's what you're supposed to do. Sigma males can't do that. When they see inefficiency or poor leadership, their brains start working overtime trying to figure out better solutions, and staying quiet about obvious problems feels almost physically impossible. This gets them labeled as difficult or insubordinate, but really they're just wired to optimize systems and solve problems. They'll happily follow a leader who knows their stuff and makes good decisions. In fact, they often make incredible team members when they respect the person in charge. But put them under someone who's all title and no substance, and yeah, there's going to be friction. It's not about rebellion, it's about standards. They can't unsee inefficiency once they spot it, and pretending everything's fine when it's clearly not goes against everything in their logical problem-solving nature. 4. They're not arrogant. They're confident in logic. When a Sigma states something with complete certainty, people immediately jump to arrogant know-it-all because they didn't see all the mental work that happened before those words came out. But here's what actually happened. He probably spent considerable time analyzing the situation, considering different angles, weighing evidence, and reaching a logical conclusion. When he speaks with confidence, it's because he's done his homework. The thing is, most people make decisions based on feelings, social pressure, or what they think others want to hear. Sigma males strip away all that noise and focus on what the data actually says. So when everyone else is dancing around a topic with maybe and perhaps, and a Sigma cuts straight to this is obviously the solution, it can sound arrogant. But it's not arrogance when you can back up everything you're saying with solid reasoning. What makes this worse is that Sigma males often don't bother explaining their entire thought process because they assume other people went through the same logical steps. They don't realize that most people didn't analyze the situation as thoroughly, so their confident conclusions seem to come out of nowhere. This creates this perception that they think they're smarter than everyone else, when really they just think differently. They're not trying to show off or prove superiority. They're just sharing the results of their mental processing. There's a big difference between arrogance and being confident in your conclusions when you've actually done the work to reach them. 5. They're not always serious. Their humor is just dry. If you've ever been around a Sigma and thought, does this guy ever laugh? Or is he permanently stuck in serious mode? Then you've probably missed about 90% of his jokes. Sigma humor is like a stealth bomber. It flies right over most people's heads because they're not expecting it from someone who looks so composed and analytical all the time. Their comedy style is basically the opposite of what most people expect. Instead of loud, obvious jokes that announce themselves, Sigma males tend to drop these perfectly timed, deadpan observations that are absolutely hilarious if you catch them. They'll make a comment that sounds completely serious on the surface, but if you really listen, it's a brilliant piece of social commentary or absurdist humor disguised as a casual statement. The problem is that their delivery is so straight-faced that people often don't realize they're joking until 5 minutes later, if at all. They're not trying to be the center of attention or get big laughs from the whole room. Their humor is more like a private conversation with people who are paying attention and can appreciate subtlety. It's comedy for people who like their jokes with a side of intelligence rather than volume. So when someone says Sigma males are humorless, they're basically admitting they missed all the sophisticated wordplay and observational comedy that was happening right in front of them. It's not that the humor isn't there, it's just operating on a frequency that requires actual listening to pick up. 6. They're not unapproachable, they're just private. There's this massive misconception that Sigma males walk around with invisible, do not disturb signs plastered across their foreheads. People see someone who isn't constantly broadcasting their thoughts and feelings and immediately assume they don't want to be bothered by anyone, ever. But that's like saying a library is unfriendly because it's quiet. You're completely missing the point of what's actually happening. The reality is that Sigma men are perfectly approachable. They just don't advertise their availability with big neon signs like some people do. They're not going to be the person at the party working the room and introducing themselves to everyone. But if you actually approach them with something genuine to talk about, you'll usually find they're completely willing to engage. The difference is in the quality of interaction they're looking for. Most people confuse privacy with hostility because we live in a culture where oversharing is considered normal and keeping things to yourself seems suspicious. But Sigma males understand that not every thought needs to be shared and not every personal detail needs to be public knowledge. This doesn't make them mysterious or aloof. It makes them selective. They're happy to connect with people who respect boundaries and understand that depth takes time to develop. If you approach them like a normal human being instead of expecting them to perform extroversion for your comfort, you'll discover they can be surprisingly engaging and insightful conversationalists. 7. They don't ignore feelings, they analyze them. This might be the biggest myth of all, that Sigma men are these emotionally disconnected robots who don't understand feelings or think emotions are weakness. In reality, they're often more emotionally intelligent than people who wear their hearts on their sleeves. They just process emotions differently than everyone expects them to. When most people experience strong emotions, they tend to react immediately and sort it out later. Sigma males do the opposite. They feel the emotion just as intensely, but instead of immediately expressing it, they pause to understand what's happening and why. They'll ask themselves questions like, why am I feeling this way? And what information is this emotion giving me? Before deciding how to respond. This isn't emotional suppression, it's emotional analysis. The thing that throws people off is that by the time a Sigma expresses an emotion, he's already processed it thoroughly, so it comes out more measured and controlled than the raw, immediate reactions most people are used to seeing. This makes him seem detached or unfeeling, when actually he's just being thoughtful about his emotional responses. He understands that emotions contain valuable information about situations and relationships, but he also knows that acting purely on emotional impulse without understanding the underlying causes usually leads to poor decisions. So he feels everything, he just thinks before he reacts. It's not less emotional, it's more strategic about emotions. 8. They're not antisocial, they're selectively social. The final myth that needs to die is this idea that Sigma males are antisocial hermits who hate human interaction and prefer to live in isolation. People see someone who doesn't show up to every social event or participate in every group conversation and immediately assume they're antisocial. But there's a huge difference between being antisocial and being selective about your social energy. Sigma men understand something that a lot of people don't want to admit. Not all social interactions are created equal. Some conversations energize you and add value to your life, while others drain your energy and waste your time. Instead of participating in social activities out of obligation or fear of missing out, they'd make conscious choices about where to invest their social energy based on what actually matters to them. This might mean they skip the office happy hour but show up for a meaningful one-on-one conversation with a friend. Or they'll avoid large group gatherings but be completely present and engaged in smaller settings where real connection can happen. It's not that they don't value relationships. They actually value them so much that they're unwilling to dilute their social energy on shallow interactions that don't serve anyone well. When you understand this, their social choices start making perfect sense. They're not avoiding people, they're optimizing for quality connections over quantity. That's not antisocial behavior, that's social intelligence in action.